happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation.
Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, in the USA, in 1929, into an African-American Baptist family who had long been involved in civil rights. African-American slaves had been freed when the Civil War ended in 1865, but racism and segregation still remained, especially in the southern states. King graduated from his segregated school to Morehouse College at the age of 15, and 3 years later he graduated with a degree in sociology and entered the Christian ministry. He then went to Crozer Theological Seminary, where he was influenced by the teaching of Mahatma Gandhi. He later said that he found the non-violent resistance of Gandhi the only morally and practically sound method open to oppressed people in their struggle for freedom. While still a student, Martin Luther King joined the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the leading black rights movement at the time. In 1955, he completed a doctorate in theology at Boston University and returned to Alabama, where he became pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. In 1955, a black woman named Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give her bus seat to a white passenger. King successfully organised a boycott of the transport system, which lasted for 381 days until the US Supreme Court found Alabama's segregation laws unconstitutional and Montgomery was forced to desegregate the transport system. In 1963, King organised a campaign of peaceful civil disobedience in Birmingham, Alabama, which he called the most thoroughly segregated big city in the US. During the campaign, more than 3,300 African Americans, including King, were jailed for violating segregation laws. As a result of this campaign, civil rights movements demonstrated across the country, and in June, President Kennedy introduced civil rights legislation to Congress. In August 1963, 250,000 people marched to the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, and King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech to the crowd. In that year, civil rights for African Americans made more progress than at any time since the end of the Civil War. In June 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed, which authorised the federal government to enforce desegregation and outlawed discrimination in public facilities and in employment. Later that year, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice.
On April 3rd, 1968, King, despite threats to his life, went to Memphis, Tennessee to support a strike by the city's garbage workers. While he was there, he spoke the "I've been to the mountaintop" sermon. The next day, Martin Luther King Jr., aged 39, was shot dead while standing on the balcony of his motel. Love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must take it because conscience tells him it's right. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you have to do it to keep moving forward. We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. King often pointed out that it was Jesus' Sermon on the Mount that inspired the social action of the civil rights movement. His notion of creative suffering, created by civil rights activists who endured persecution and police brutality, came from his Christian faith in the suffering of Jesus. King dreamed of a day when America lived up to its creed, and when all people were together as one, and freedom reigns. His "I have a dream" speech echoes the prophet Isaiah. "I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every hill and mountain shall be made low, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together." King hoped that one day all people in positions of power over others will do justice, love, and kindness, and walk humbly with God. His hope for an end to war was rooted in Isaiah's vision that people will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. To critics who accused him of being an extremist, King said that he stood in a long line of extremists, including the prophet Amos, Jesus, the Apostle Paul, the Protestant reformer Martin Luther, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln. King asked the question, what kind of extremists will we be? Extremists for hate or for love? For injustice or for justice? For evil or for goodness? In his last speech, King drew from the biblical story of Moses. "Like anybody, I would like to live a long life, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will, and He's allowed me to go up to the mountain, and I've looked over, and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land." Martin Luther King was a Christian and a civil rights campaigner. He was instrumental in creating change in 1960s America. His campaigns were key to allow racial harmony in an otherwise racist country, and he was successful without ever resorting to violence. He followed his Christian faith and demonstrated agape and the golden rule, love your neighbour as love yourself, on multiple occasions, and it always reflected in his speeches. He helped shape America, and his legacy still lives on today.